Hello and welcome, I'm Ellie Richardson and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Bangladesh polls close and the voting ends. Separately, bomb blasts at 2 polling booths as Bangladesh votes in a high-stakes election following the 2024 ouster of long-time Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Police say an 18-year-old woman killed her mother and stepbrother before opening fire at her former school in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia. 9 people, including the suspect who died by suicide, are dead in one of Canada's most deadliest mass shootings. The motive is unknown. Russia fires drones and ballistic missiles across Ukraine overnight, targeting energy systems and injuring at least 7 people in Kyiv, Dnipro and Odessa. Ukrainian officials say hundreds of weapons disrupt power, heating and water as a massive attack hits buildings in the capital. Russia has blocked popular messaging service WhatsApp for failing to abide by Russian legislation, the Kremlin has said. Peskov said the decision was due to WhatsApp's reluctancy to comply with the norms and letter of Russian law. President Donald Trump says talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu produced no definitive agreement on Iran. Netanyahu says Israel's security must be protected and signals no clear US commitment to expand talks beyond Iran's nuclear program. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel joins President Donald Trump's board of peace during talks in Washington. Images show Netanyahu signing the accession document after meeting Secretary of State Marco Rubio, confirming Israel's membership. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader says Tehran will not compromise on its missile capabilities amid ongoing talks with the United States. Ali Shamkhani calls the missile program non-negotiable during events marking the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. Libya has granted several foreign companies new oil exploration and production licenses for the first time in 17 years, after more than a decade of political instability, as Libya is seeking to draw major global energy companies back. And for your top story this hour, Norwegian police searched the homes of former Prime Minister Thorbjørn Jagland as part of an ongoing investigation into his ties with the late US sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The raids, which took place at Jagland's Oslo residence and recreational properties, were confirmed by his lawyer, André Bosevit. The investigation follows the release of new files of Epstein, revealing detailed plans for 2014, his family and his son's girlfriend to visit Epstein's properties in Florida and the Caribbean. Although Jagland has denied ever visiting Epstein's private island, the investigation is examining whether he received gifts, loans or other benefits related to his official prostitutions, including his time at the chair of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee and as foreign minister. His lawyer stated that the ongoing searches were expected and as part of a standard investigation. Jagland has expressed his willingness to fully cooperate with authorities to ensure the matter is thoroughly clarified. We are now being joined by Mark Sutherland, who is a geopolitical commentator who's joining us from London. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. What are the legal grounds and scope of the current Norwegian police investigation? And how do these newly released Epstein documents factor into it? Are they really going to go into proper trying to find out into Jagaland's property and find all of these things, or are they just doing it for the sake of it, do you think?
Ellie, good to be with you. You ask a very, very important question in regard to this yet more fascinating Epstein drops. But we just have to look at how the ramifications of that are then pouring out in various different countries, like for argument's sake, here in the UK. And then I'm looking at the situation in Norway. I'm also rather intrigued because there's two other Norwegian diplomats that have stepped down, or known as diplomatic heavyweights. I think Mona Jewel and her husband Larsen, who in 93 to 94, according to reports like The Guardian, for argument's sake, yes, I did quote that, looking back at them because of their involvement in the Oslo Accords, which on a personal level I find rather interesting. At the end of the day, you ask the question, are they taking this seriously or are they not? Well, over here, the police in the UK seem to be taking the accusations in regard to Mandelson and now Andrew Mountbatten, formerly known as Prince. They are now taking that very seriously as well. So maybe it's the ramification in regard to Norway. Let's not forget, let's underline this 1,000 times, the where young girls, the way that they have been treated. We think of Virginia Defray amongst many others is beyond words, is indescribable, and the all of these crimes in this case. So when you are suddenly linked with this, just because your name is in a file doesn't mean that you are guilty of anything. But when people go in more depth and then they discover, are they feeding information back to him? Are they then wanting young girls for their own sexual pleasure? Then people have to pursue this. But the big issue is, Ellie, is that it's taking a lot of airtime, a lot of newspaper time, and of course people want action. The big issue is whether they will actually see that, and whether these girls will actually see the justice that they deserve. Ellie.
And do you think Norwegian police doing this will enable the searches of other high-ranking officials' properties from around the world? As we know that places like the UK are also doing this. Keir Starmer has even said himself that he will cooperate with the police. King Charles has said himself that he will cooperate with the police. Do you think this will also be a domino effect for the rest of the world?
Ellie, is another very good question, because if we say the UK is the first domino, then we've gone to Norway. That's the second domino. Then there will be even more, maybe even more investigations in regard to America and other countries. We wait and see. But there's two big heavyweight dominoes, especially with all the European links. I am look into and keep an eye on these other two diplomats, partly because of the past when they've been involved in the Oslo Accords or any other negotiating. It brings a lot of questions in suddenly. I think in regard to Mono Jewel's case, being the Norwegian ambassador to Jordan and Iraq. So we have to look into this. No one is above the law, and they cannot then declare diplomatic immunity, even though many people try that from various countries around the world. When they're found out in regard to crimes and their behavior that they should not be doing. We wait and see, Ellie, but you ask an extremely good question, because what's happening is a lot of people are looking into this. I mean, it's a 3 million plus drop of information, but people are looking into this. But I will add a little caveat here, is Will people see justice? Will people be brought to court? Will all of this be really brought into the light, as is what is in the dark will be brought into the light? Will that happen? And will people who are shouting and screaming like they are at King Charles when he goes on walkabout in regard to the Epstein, in regard to Andrew Mountbatten, formerly known as Prince, all of this, it's becoming very uncomfortable for them as well, and people want to see results. But the problem is, and I could say this, that when people feel that they're getting more gaslit over this and that there are no results, then they become very, very disenfranchised from the political system, from voting, and from the establishment, because they just think they get away with it, where normal people that are going around their lives feel that they are suffering because of these actions of the elites and the establishment across many different areas. And I think people have really had enough. Ellie.
And in what ways do the revelations from these Epstein files, including correspondence and alleged meetings, challenge the public trust in these political and diplomatic figures like Jagland and also Norway's royal family, as we know some of them are included in the files as well?
Well, that's I don't know that in regard to the Norwegian family, but if, as you confirming to say, I accept what you were saying, but we then have to look at how these families are then linked within Europe, like other diplomatic relations, other diplomats are, other politicians are. And they discuss things behind closed doors, which frankly we do need to know about, and that is why the Epstein file, the drops, are so important to people, and so they should be, and especially when we look at someone was put in jail, was found guilty in regard to paedophilic crimes, quite rightly, and then people still within our own establishment here, royal family here and elsewhere, then have relationships with that person. It's opened a lot of questions, quite rightly. The issue is this: is that people want to feel that they can trust the people that they're voting for, trust the government, trust diplomats who they believe are working on behalf of their country. When you can't trust them because they are only working on behalf of themselves, then it raises huge moral questions. And then, as I said earlier, Ellie, and quite rightly you've asked that, it then causes huge disaffection amongst people. And then it can lead to a situation, as people say, what's the point in voting? What's the point of even, why do we call ourselves a country with a moral code anymore? Look at how these people are conducting themselves. Ellie.
Thank you, Mark. Don't go too far, as we will be back with you very shortly. Belgian police have conducted a raid on several European Commission offices as part of an investigation into the sale of 23 buildings acquired by the Belgian Sovereign Wealth Fund, Federal Holding and Investment Company of Belgium, in 2024. According to the European Public Prosecutor's Office, this raid is aimed at collecting evidence for suspected breaches of European Union regulations related to the transaction. The Commission's Budget Department is reported to have been one of the offices targeted in the operation. However, no additional details have been released at this stage regarding the investigation's process or specifics. The European Commissions have not yet issued any official statement on the matter. The authorities continue to review the situation. Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, says she has been invited to the United States in what could mark a significant step in warming ties between Caracas and Washington. Rodriguez says she and US officials are contemplating a visit once cooperation frameworks are in place, particularly on energy and economic recovery. The invitation comes as US Energy Secretary Chris Wright visited Caracas, focusing on rebuilding Venezuela's oil industry after years of decline under sanctions and mismanagement. Rodriguez, who became interim president in January following the removal of Nicolas Maduro, also reiterated that she believes Maduro remains the country's legitimate leader and strongly defended him and the First Lady. The US and Venezuela are now navigating a delicate relationship as officials seek investment and recovery, while Rodriguez balances her position at home with broader diplomatic outreach. We are now being joined again by Mark Sutherland. Thank you so much for joining us back here. What does Delcy Rodriguez reported invitation to the United States signal about the state of US and Venezuelan relations following the ousted of Nicolas Maduro?
Well, this is all rather interesting. So let's go back in history. Of course, the America is extremely concerned about its backyard, hence recent movements in regard to the Panama Canal. Narco-terrorism that has been going on since the mid-80s, if not just before. They're extremely concerned about that for many years. And also with Hezbollah, Hamas, they gain finance from narco-terrorism. They're also very concerned on the southern border in regard to fentanyl, Chinese involvement there as well. Why am I saying that? That is what Maduro previously they're involved in. Also their links with Iran, with China and Russia. This is all on the back door of America. If you go back to 1998, when they voted for socialism within Venezuela, leading up to that, there'd been a big investment from American companies, oil companies, up, of course, until that point. Venezuela has a huge oil field. And then when they turned socialist, that's all nationalized. A number of American petro companies then lost all that infrastructure. So that has been on the table. That's all part of this discussion to then remember that over 6 million Venezuelans have left the country since 1998, and when Maduro was taken out, whatever people think of that, by a helicopter in a rather interesting operation, he and his wife, then many people were celebrating that. We have to look at how the people of Venezuela are suffering. And you go back to the political roots of why they then voted Chavez in, then leading to Maduro. So this is all about then in their understandable opinion, is trying to get the country back on its feet, and it is through oil. And they are also concerned about the other links that the Venezuelan government have with the countries that I've already mentioned. Plus, it's not surprising that the present lady, who then takes the title of the president, will say that, as she was very much by Maduro's side when he was then seemed to then voted as president. There are huge questions in regard to how those elections were conducted, and there's huge questions in regard to fraud that would then take place in people's opinion. Ellie.
And like you just said, there are some risks in this. What are the domestic political risks for Rodriguez in negotiating with the US while trying to maintain support from Maduro loyalists and Venezuela's military?
Well, the bottom line is that those people who are in charge are then able to make decisions. And the big question, quite understandably, has been how has this actually benefited themselves personally? Because it hasn't benefited the Venezuelan people. That is what they are saying. That's why there were huge celebrations in regard to the actions that America took against Maduro. And as I say again, this is an incredible tightrope that this lady is actually walking on, because her and others have made a lot of money by exploiting this situation in Venezuela. By then, as I would say, tell me a country where socialism has actually worked. It doesn't. It leads to this kind of situation where many people want to get out. They're not able to make a living. And also, you then have to look at what's happening in Cuba, because that could be next. This is the ideology that we are pushing against. That is the ideology that America, understandably, is very concerned of what's going on in his backyard. But I will say this: of course, Americans' history in regard to its backyard is another subject we would need 2 or 3 hours to even discuss. But in this situation, when you have got the black gold oil, then you need to be pumping that and getting it out to benefit your people. Of course, that is not everyone's benefit in regard to OPEC, etc., who then want prices at a particular level. That's why also they're concerned that if the Iranian regime falls as well, then in Iran they will want to be pumping the big oil fields out that they have as well. There is such geopolitical complex of web that is being woven that we need so much time to unweave. But that is all. These are other considerations that I'm sure that the Trump administration is taking into consideration as they're dealing with this. Ellie.
Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us here today. It's a pleasure speaking with you. In a significant development, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has reportedly selected his 13-year-old daughter, Kim Jong-ae, as his heir. The move comes after Kim Jong-ae's growing public presence at key events, including international visits and appearances at military parades. Despite the country's traditionally patriarchal society, Kim Jong-un's daughter seemed poised to take on the leadership role, with signs pointing her to increasing involvement in policy discussions. The decision has raised questions given the family's preference for male heirs and the youth of Kim Jong-ae. We are now being joined by Dr. Sanjay Kumar, who's a journalist, who's joining us from South Korea. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. How significant is that Kim Jong-ae, reportedly 13 years old, has been made the face of future leadership, challenging traditional male-dominated successions?
Well, in politics, nothing happens by accident. We have to understand this. And there are 3 factors which I see is working here. Number 1 is optics, second is ideology, and the third is the need of the North Korean regime. So when I say optics, I would like to recall and bring to your attention that this is not a new thing which is coming out in picture right now as designation or what the National Intelligence Agency of South Korea is reporting. It is happening step by step. If we see last few months, we could see that Kim Jong-ae was continuously attending state events. She was even going to places of political significance, even the party, Workers' Party events, and even in some cases she was following the state visit of Kim Jong-un as well. So this should be seen as optics when it comes to North Koreans' way of administering the things and the regime's approach of executing their plans and future, or you can say the establishment of new leadership. That is the optics version. The second one is ideology. She was not just visiting state events, but even she was visiting some places of eternal importance, where their leaders, the North Koreans, they really kind of worship their leader like anything. And she had been visiting some places such as, which establishes Juche ideology. So there is an ideological establishment through which Kim Jong-ae had been repetitively being brought into picture. And then the third one is the need. In current times, all the activities, if you see, it is forcing the North Koreans to come up with some sort of a second line of leadership in the regime. So it is a strategical tactics to uphold the strength of the regime, and that is why I think Kim Jong-un is trying to bring this second leadership and to establish the fourth generation of the regime. No matter she is just 13 years old, but it takes time, step by step. But yes, one thing we can see here, which is very little uncommon, is that even Kim Jong-un was brought very late. But in case of Kim Joo-ae, she is brought into picture at a very early phase. This is the only difference. But if you understand from these three angles, it would help you to understand very easily.
And in what ways could Kim Joo-ae's increasingly public role and visibility, including state media appearances and high-profile events, be part of a broader political strategy by Kim Jong-un?
Especially, this is a modus operandi of the regime and the leaders and the close advisors and the close aides of Kim Jong-un, who keep coming up with this kind of strategies. And this is not just limited to, the modus operandi is not just limited to ICBMs or nuclear tests or recalibrated and recalcitrant approach of dealing with some countries such as Japan and South Korea. So I think those advisors and those people behind, they are deliberately doing it to establish her in the domestic politics, as well as to motivate the people for leadership, for new leadership. That new leadership is not leadership of time being, but second track of leadership. So this is also a strategy. And from diplomatic perspective, the North Korea is not, in recent days, they have not voiced any anger against US, if we closely see. So on one side, they are trying to show that they are ready to, not ready, but at least they are not reluctant to talk to the US, but considering South Korea as enemy.
I'm really sorry, Dr. Sanjay Kumar. It's been lovely speaking to you, but we have just come in with some breaking news. A magnitude 6.6 earthquake struck near the coast of central Chile today at evening at 10 past 10 p.m. GMT, according to the German Research Centre for Geosciences. The earthquake occurred at a depth of 10 kilometres. While no immediate reports of casualties or major damage have been confirmed, the area is being closely monitored. The region, known for its seismic activity along the Pacific Ring of Fire, remains on alert. Further updates will follow as officials assess the impact. And some more breaking news. A US judge has ruled against the BBC's request to delay the discovery phase in the libel case filed by US President Donald Trump. The case, which stems from a report the BBC published, will now move forward as planned. The discussion comes as the trial is scheduled to take place in February 2027. Trump has accused the BBC of publishing false and defamatory information about him, and the ongoing case will examine the evidence surrounding these claims. The judge's ruling marks a significant step in what is expected to be a highly scrutinised legal battle, with implications for media accountability and free speech in the US. Next up, a massive sinkhole swallowed a busy roadway in Shanghai within seconds. Dramatic CCTV footage showing the ground collapse without warning. The incident occurred near Qixin Road in the city's Minhang district, where a section of tarmac suddenly buckled and plunged into a deep crater, sending cracks through nearby structures and forcing vehicles to swerve away at the last moment. Officials said construction crews had flagged a water leak in the area a day earlier. By Thursday morning, the situation escalated into a full-scale collapse, with a hole estimated to be 10 to 20 metres wide, opening up and debris tumbling into the void. Street lamps tilted, asphalt folded inward, and dust filled the air as stunned bystanders backed away from the edge. No fatalities were reported, though the close calls and visible structural damage have raised fresh concerns. Shanghai's soft alluvial soil, combined with groundwater depollution and rapid urban construction, makes parts of the city vulnerable to subsidize. Experts note that many sinkholes in China are linked to infrastructure failures or underground pipe bursts. Emergency crews cordoned off the site and began repair work, with investigators examining whether a burst water main triggered the collapse. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.